L never touches the glove. He never touches the blood vial. He doesn't argue a single one of the things the defense spent 9 months turning into a circus, and he still closes this case in a week. Now, before anyone types it, no, I'm not telling you a jury got it wrong. The jury acquitted. This video accepts that completely. That is not the question we're asking. The question is, how does a case with that much physical evidence fall apart? And what would a detective whose entire method does not depend on physical evidence have done instead? That's the video. Stay to the end because this one lands on a book, a real one that actually exists, and 3 facts around it that have never once fit together. This is not a video about whether the jury was right. It answered that under oath, and I'm not relitigating it. This is a video about how you actually run a case like this one, and why the most watched prosecution in history handed the win away. To see why L makes this case look easy, you have to understand that he does not investigate the way anyone you have ever watched investigate. In Death Note, L is not just a detective. He's the single hidden identity behind the world's 3 greatest detectives all at once, and he closed something like 3,500 cases without ever showing his face to a soul. He sits barefoot in a chair, all hunched over, eating sugar cubes by the handful, and takes apart cases that governments cannot. And his signature move is the exact thing that matters here. When L is hunting a killer, he has almost no physical evidence on. He does not dust for prints. He runs a single television broadcast, a trap, and goads the target into reacting to it live on air. In the anime, in the manga, in the story, he narrows down an entire nation down to one region using nothing but the suspect's own response. Sit with that, because it is the whole thesis of this video. L's method is making the other side expose themselves. He does not need the glove. He does not need the blood. He builds cases out of behavior, timing, and pressure. The 3 things you cannot contaminate in a police lab. He cracked a Los Angeles serial killer murder cipher the authorities had written off as unsolvable. He can reconstruct exactly how a killer operates from nothing but the pattern of the crime to L. The forensic evidence is the least interesting thing in that room, and he does all of it without a shred of respect for who you are. In the story, L's prime suspect is the polite, brilliant son of the police chief, the last person anyone would ever look at, and it does not slow him down for a second. The status, charm, or spotless public face. To L, these are not shields, they're just variables. He once caught a suspect by locking himself in a cell with the man for over a month just to watch him, because L trusts his own eyes over any lab result on Earth, which makes him the single worst possible opponent for the one defense strategy that actually worked in 1995. Because here's the thing people get backwards about this trial. The prosecution did not lose because they were short on evidence. They lost because they had a mountain of it, and the mountain is what buried them. Think about how strange that actually is. Every blood drop became a chain of custody argument. Every sample became a contamination question. A glove turned into live television that went wrong on camera. And the detective who found some of the most important evidence got impeached so badly he later pleaded to perjury. The more evidence they stacked on the table, the more surface area the defense had to attack. That is the case, not a whodunit. A case that drowned in its own evidence in front of the largest television audience in history against a defense whose entire strategy was just a few words. Don't trust the lab. And sitting underneath all of it was the second problem, the one nobody could cross-examine. The defendant was not a stranger. He was one of the most beloved athletes in the country, a face people had cheered for their whole lives, in a case wired live into every living room. That is a kind of gravity, and it bends a courtroom whether anyone admits it or not. So the detective you need here is not one who can find more evidence. It is one who doesn't need evidence at all, and that is the one thing L is. Here's the file. On the night of June 12, 1994, 2 people, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, were murdered outside their home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. I'm going to keep this part plain and keep it moving, because how the case was argued is what matters here, not the worst night of 2 families. 5 days later, after failing to turn himself in, O.J. Simpson rode in the back of a white Ford Bronco driven by his friend Al Cowlings in a slow-speed pursuit down the Los Angeles freeways that the entire country watched live. He was arrested that night. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and pleaded not guilty. And from the moment that plea was entered, the case stopped being about one night in Brentwood and became something else entirely. Whether the people who gathered the evidence against him could be trusted at all. The criminal trial ran most of 1995. Judge Lance Ito, prosecutors Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden, up against a defense team so stacked it earned a nickname, the Dream Team. They called it the trial of the century, and for once the hype was earned. It ran the better part of a year, more than 90 witnesses, a jury sequestered for months, and a television audience at the verdict estimated north of 100 million people. And the case turned again and again on the handling of physical evidence. That June, prosecutor Darden had Simpson try on the leather gloves that were in evidence on camera, and they appeared not to fit, which handed the defense the most famous closing line in the history of American law: if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. The criminalist who collected the blood evidence, Dennis Fung, was cross-examined for days on how it was gathered and stored. The defense raised questions about a blood preservative and about a discrepancy in Simpson's reference vial, and argued openly that evidence could have been contaminated or worse. And remember, this was early in the DNA era. The blood evidence included some of the first DNA matching a jury had ever been asked to weigh, and the defense turned that novelty into doubt. New science plus a collection process they could question, and a jury does not know then where to stand. And then there was Detective Mark Furman, who testified under oath that he had not used a certain racial slur in years, and was then contradicted by his own voice on tape. Recalled to the stand, he took the fifth. A year later, he pleaded no contest to perjury. That one is an actual conviction, so I can state it plain. On October 3rd, 1995, the jury acquitted Simpson on both counts. Then, in a separate civil trial in 1997, a different jury found him liable for the wrongful death of Ron Goldman and for battery against Nicole Brown Simpson, and ordered him to pay $33.5 million. Acquitted in court, liable in court. 2 juries, 2 standards of proof, 2 different answers to the same night. Hold on to that. We'll get back to it. Now, let's set the rules. Because from here on, this is a scenario L is not real, the trial record is, and we are not changing one fact in it. We go to L. We hand him exactly what the real prosecution had in the summer of 1994. The same evidence, the same witnesses, the same impossible spotlight. And we ask one question. Given the case that actually fell apart, what does a detective, who never trusts a lab in the first place, do differently? Now, everything after this is simulation. The failures are the real failures. The only thing we're changing is the method. And one rule on top of that. Because it matters. We're not replaying the verdict with a happier ending. We're asking something much more defined, narrower, and honestly more interesting. Same facts, same failures, different detective. What breaks differently? Move 1. L throws out the physical evidence on purpose, doesn't use it, not because it is wrong, because it is contestable. And L can see from across the room that a case built on blood collection and glove demonstrations is a case where the defense gets to put the crime lab on trial instead of the defendant. He does the thing the real prosecution could not make itself to do. He refuses to build on the exact foundation the other side is best at cracking. The real trial turned into a referendum on the LAPD crime lab. L simply declines to hand them a crime lab to argue about. Move 2. He rebuilds the case out of the things you cannot contaminate. The timeline, the window of opportunity, who said what, when and to whom, the behavior around the event, not the test tube after it. This is the material L actually prefers because none of it lives in a vial a defense expert gets to question for a week. Who was where and when? What was said in the hours around it? The gaps a story cannot explain without inventing something new. That is a case you cannot spill on a lab floor. And this is about as peak L as it gets. And quick pause here. If you like what's happening in this video, subscribe. It's the only reason the next one gets made. Alright, let's get back to it. Move 3. The trap. This is L's real signature. The movie has run since his very first case when he was 8. He does not try to prove the ending to a jury. He builds a situation where the person on the other side has to respond, and the response becomes the evidence. L's entire career is engineering one moment where a target has to make a move and then reading everything from how they make it. Now you apply that here, and that means L does not spend a year defending his own evidence. He spends it controlling the board, the questions, the order, the pressure. So the case turns on the parts he designed, not the parts the defense gets to choose. In the story, he ran it as a single live broadcast. Against a case argued in a spotlight this bright, with cameras in every corner, that spotlight becomes the prosecution's weakness. In L's hands, that spotlight is the trap. Because here's what the dream team never once had to plan for: a prosecutor who wanted the cameras on. The real prosecution feared the circus. L would have used it. The bigger the audience, the more a single wrong move costs. Move 4. L never puts a glove on anyone. He never hands the defense a Dennis Fung to take apart for a week. He never lets one detective's credibility become the entire ballgame. Every single point where the real case broke, L designs the case to not depend on in the first place. No glove to not fit, no vial to come up short. No detective whose word the whole thing rests on. He removes every domino before the defense can line them up. That is the whole difference between them. The real prosecution built a case that could be attacked. L built a case with nothing in it to attack. Move 5. The one the real prosecution never solved. The star power. In that courtroom, the defendant's fame was its own force. A lifetime of goodwill sitting in the jury's memory before a single witness spoke, and the state never figured out how or what to do with it. L does not have that problem because L does not care about who you are. To him, there are no celebrities. There's people telling the truth and people who aren't. A famous face is just a more interesting mask. The one advantage that quietly shaped the real trial, the benefit of the doubt a stranger would never get, is worth nothing against a detective who was never a fan in the first place. And here's where the case L builds runs straight into the thing I promised you: the book. In 2006, a book was announced under the title, If I Did It. A publisher canceled it after public backlash. And then in 2007, a bankruptcy court handed the rights to the family of Ron Goldman to help them collect on that civil judgment. And they published it themselves with a subtitle they chose, Confessions of the Killer. Now I have to be careful here, and I want you to know exactly why. That subtitle is the Goldman family's words, not a court's, not the author's. I'm not going to sit here and tell you a book title is a confession, because it's not. That is precisely the kind of shortcut this entire case punishes. Now looking at what you're actually left holding though, 3 facts. A book called If I Did It exists and was published. A civil jury found him liable for the wrongful death of Ron Goldman and for battery against Nicole Brown Simpson, and the criminal court acquitted him. All 3 of those are true at the same time, and they don't fit together. And if you want the technical reason they don't, it's almost too clean, honestly. The criminal court asked, is he guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? And answered no. The civil court asked, is he more likely than not responsible? And answered yes. Same man, same night, same evidence, 2 very different questions. The system gave 2 different answers and never once reconciled it. That gap, the space between what one jury found and the other found, and what the system finally did with all of it, is where the whole case actually lives. The real trial never closed it. It just ended. And that is the one place L does his best work. Not standing over a body proving what happened. Standing in the exact spot where the official story stops making sense and refuses to leave until somebody explains it. So, could L catch O.J. Simpson? Here's the honest answer. L built the one case 1995 never did. A case with nothing in it for the defense to break. And then he does the thing neither jury and neither trial ever actually managed. He makes that gap impossible to look away from, which brings us to the next and completely different kind of failure. Because the OJ case failed at trial, in public, with the whole world watching every second of it. The next case failed years before any trial, in a quiet apartment, when the police had the killer dead to rights, standing right in front of them, and they just walked away. No crime lab this time, no dream team. The world was not watching. Just a detective whose single gift is reading the predator behind the ordinary, unforgettable face, against the man the system looked directly at and let go. Could Dokes catch Jeffrey Dahmer?